I knew something was off the second I saw the pink garden flamingo staked into my side yard. That wasn't mine, and it sure as hell wasn't where my property line ended. I'd lived in this house for 8 years, and I knew every inch of it. But apparently, Deborah Vanwell, the HOA president with a voice like a rusty screen door and the attitude to match, had decided my property needed a little adjusting. I stood at the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, staring at the new line of freshly dug-up turf and plastic flags that weren't mine. 2 of my original metal boundary markers were gone, just gone, in their place. A smug little white sign that read, "Common area, no personal use." "Deborah," I called, already knowing she was out front watering her petunias like she was auditioning for a gardening commercial. She turned, predictably in her sun hat and HOA-issued polo shirt. "Oh, hello, Preston. I saw the confusion on your face. Don't worry, that part of the yard was always part of the HOA's green belt. We're just reclaiming it for the community." "You mean you're stealing my land?" I said flatly. Her smile didn't even flinch. "Preston, we reviewed the maps at last month's board meeting." "You would have known if you attended." I clenched my jaw. I had missed that meeting, the only one I'd missed in a year, because I was in the ER with my kid, Grant, who broke his arm skateboarding. And now Deborah was conveniently using that absence to stake a claim on my land. "I'll be getting my own survey done," I said. "You're welcome to waste your money," she said, and walked off like she'd just won. That night, I dug through my filing cabinet and found the original plat map from when I bought the house. And just as I remembered, my property line extended 3 feet past where she'd placed those flags. She hadn't just moved the markers, she'd taken them out entirely. I was furious, but I wasn't about to yell into the void. I wanted proof. The next morning, I called a licensed surveyor crew. They'd be out in 3 days. In the meantime, I installed a pair of motion-activated cameras on my garage and porch. I had a gut feeling Deborah wasn't done messing around. Sure enough, on day 2, I caught her on camera crouching near the flower bed by the side fence, shovel in hand. I watched her dig up something, then walk off like she was just pruning roses. I downloaded the footage, labeled it, and backed it up 3 different ways. When the survey crew arrived, I handed them everything: the plat, the footage, and a thermos of black coffee. "I think the HOA president is tampering with property lines," I said. I wanted official. They got to work, and within an hour the lead guy, a tall, no-nonsense type named Ray, waved me over. "Your memory's solid," Ray said. "Your actual property line is exactly 3 feet beyond where those new flags are. HOA's way off. You can certify that," he nodded, already drafting the report. "And we'll mark the real line before we leave." By the time they were done, a fresh row of bright orange stakes clearly outlined my full lot. Deborah came out just in time to see the last one hammered in. She stormed across the street, arms flailing like she was trying to flag down a plane. "What is this? You can't just hire people to redraw the map. It's a certified survey," I said, holding up the paperwork. "You moved my markers. That's illegal." "I did no such thing." I pulled out my phone. "Want to see the video of you digging up my marker Tuesday night?" Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. She glanced around, realizing half the neighbors were now watching from porches and sidewalks. "This isn't over, Preston," she hissed. "Oh, but it is," I said. "And you'd better hope the city doesn't get wind of what you've been doing." She turned and marched off, but I could see the panic in her walk. I had her dead to rights, and she knew it, what she didn't know. I'd already sent the footage and the survey to the county assessor's office and filed a formal complaint. The county investigator showed up 4 days later in an unmarked white SUV, clipboard in hand, boots still dusty from the last property he visited. He introduced himself as Inspector Wallace, and he had the kind of demeanor that told you he'd seen neighbors go to war over tomato plants and vinyl fences. But when I handed over the surveillance video and the surveyor's signed report, his expression shifted from casual to razor sharp. "Tampering with boundary markers is a felony in this state," he said, flipping through the documentation. "Especially when it's done with intent to defraud or convert land for unauthorized use." "Deborah claimed it was always HOA land," I said. "But somehow she reclaimed the exact strip where I was planning to build a pergola," Wallace raised an eyebrow. She said that on record. She said it in front of 4 neighbors who were out walking their dogs. I can give you names. He jotted that down. I'll need to speak with them. And I'll also need to see the HOA's original plat filings. If they submitted altered maps to the city or the county, that's a different level of trouble. By the time he left, Wallace had taken photos of the property, the flags, and the missing marker location. He also took a USB with the video file and a notarized copy of the survey results. He didn't say much about what would happen next, but his tone had shifted. It wasn't just a neighborhood squabble anymore. It was official. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. Normally, those meetings took place in the community clubhouse with maybe 6 people showing up. This time, it was standing room only. Word had spread fast about Deborah's attempt to annex part of my yard, and now every homeowner was suddenly interested in where their own property lines stood. Deborah opened the meeting with her usual sing-song greeting, but the energy in the room was tense. People weren't here for cookies and budget updates. Before she could launch into the agenda, I stood. I'd like to make a motion to add an item, I said. HOA president misconduct and unauthorized land seizure. Her mouth twitched. That's not how our agenda process works, Preston. Items must be submitted 72 hours in advance. Several voices piped up behind me. We want to hear it. Let him speak. It's our land too. What's going on? She tried to keep her composure, but the room had turned. With a visible effort to maintain control, she gestured stiffly. Fine, you have 2 minutes. I walked to the front and pulled a stack of printed photos from a manila folder. This is a certified survey completed by a licensed team. These are the original plat maps from the purchase of my home. This, I added, holding up a still from the security footage, is Deborah removing my boundary marker at night without authorization. Several people gasped. Others leaned in, trying to get a better look. I handed copies to the secretary, who began passing them around. I've already filed a formal complaint with the county. An inspector has opened a case. If anyone else has had similar property disputes, now would be the time to speak up. A man near the back, Lewis, who lived 2 streets over, raised his hand. She told me last summer that the strip behind my garden belonged to the HOA, said I had to remove my bench. I didn't think to question it. Another woman, Nina, who ran the daycare from her basement, spoke next. She claimed I was encroaching on community grounds because I put up a tire swing. I had to take it down. Deborah's face flushed a deep crimson. These claims are completely unfounded. The HOA board reviewed all maps thoroughly. Everything was done by the book. Then you won't mind producing those maps, I said. The ones you submitted to the city. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Because, I continued, if they differ from the county's official records, that's document falsification, and I've already requested a public records release. At that, the murmuring turned into a buzz of whispered conversation. Deborah tried to regain control, but the meeting had slipped away from her. 2 days later, I got a call from Inspector Wallace. Found something interesting, he said. The HOA submitted a revised plat map 2 months ago without proper disclosure or community vote. The new map shifts 3 properties' boundaries inward by roughly 2 to 4 feet, yours included. My jaw tightened. So they filed false documents. Looks that way. We've opened a formal investigation into fraudulent land reallocation. And since it was submitted under the president's signature, she's liable. That afternoon, a sheriff's vehicle pulled up in front of Deborah's house. I watched from my front window as the deputy walked up to her porch and handed her a thick envelope. She tried to act casual, but her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. It was a subpoena. Wallace had warned me this was coming. By the following week, Deborah had gone silent. Her daily walks, her loud phone calls on the porch, even her constant micromanaging of other people's lawns all gone. In her place, a temporary notice posted on the HOA bulletin board. Effective immediately, Vice President Greg Barnes will assume interim leadership duties pending internal review. Greg was a retired firefighter with 0 patience for drama and even less tolerance for corruption. He called an emergency meeting and announced a third-party audit of all HOA property decisions made in the last 5 years. It was the first time I'd ever seen people clap at one of these things. After the meeting, Greg pulled me aside. "I've seen a lot in my day, but I've never seen someone get caught on camera digging up survey markers like it's some kind of covert op," he said. "You handled this clean, Preston." "Real clean. I just wanted my yard back. You might have just saved half this neighborhood from losing theirs." The audit turned up more than expected unauthorized landscaping contracts, inflated maintenance bills, and a mysterious green space beautification line item that funneled over $20,000 to a vendor who didn't exist. All of it had Deborah's signature. The board voted to permanently remove her, pending legal proceedings. The county's investigation led to charges of property tampering, document fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. Deborah's sunny porch garden withered in the weeks that followed, and eventually, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. As for me, I built that pergola, exactly where I'd planned it. I even added a small plaque on one of the beams that read, "Surveyed, Certified." Reclaimed. It made the neighbors laugh every time they walked by. Even better, it reminded everyone that no one, not even a power-hungry HOA president, is above the law when the community stands its ground. Greg called me 2 weeks after the audit team delivered their preliminary findings. I was sanding the cedar rails on the pergola, headphones in, when I noticed him standing at the edge of my yard holding a manila folder and looking like he'd just walked out of a courtroom. "This is a mess," he said, as I pulled the earbuds out. "Worse than we thought." He opened the folder and handed me a copy of a vendor invoice. 3 years of payments to a landscaping company, Verdant Earthworks, $17,000 annually. No tax ID, no service records, no equipment logs. The address is a mailbox store in a strip mall. I looked closer. The signatures on the approvals were all the same looping initials. Who's behind it? We pulled the bank records. The payments were deposited into an account under the name DV Property Services. I let out a low whistle. "She created a shell company," Greg nodded, "and funneled over $50,000 through it. That's not just HOA misconduct, that's wire fraud." The HOA board had hired a forensic accountant at Greg's suggestion. The guy was a former IRS contractor and had spent the last week tearing through the financials. What he found was damning. Fake landscaping bills, duplicated maintenance charges, and a string of monthly consulting fees paid from the HOA's reserve fund to an alias tied to Deborah's maiden name. It was a full-blown embezzlement scheme. Greg had already looped in the district attorney's office. They sent a financial crimes investigator and a plainclothes detective named Rivas, who requested to speak with me since I'd kicked off the case. We met on my porch mid-morning, the sun catching the edge of his badge as he leaned forward in the chair. "You mentioned she removed your property markers. Did she ever threaten other residents if they pushed back?" I nodded. "She told Nina from down the street that her daycare would be reported to zoning if she didn't comply. And Lewis said she warned him about unauthorized structures when he asked about his garden bench." Rivas made notes. "That's important. Pattern of intimidation to preserve access to stolen funds." "We've also found evidence she used HOA authority to block resident complaints from reaching the full board." "How?" "She altered meeting minutes, deleted emails, pressured the previous secretary to resign 6 months ago. We found a resignation letter with a line about unethical practices, but it was never presented to the board." I stared at him. "She buried it," shredded the original, but the secretary kept a scanned copy on her personal laptop. "She's cooperating." That same day, the county prosecutor filed formal charges: falsification of public documents, grand theft, unlawful appropriation, and criminal impersonation. Deborah's attorney tried to argue it was all a misunderstanding, that she'd merely streamlined operations. But the judge wasn't buying it. She was released on bond, pending trial, but the terms barred her from contacting any HOA members or stepping foot on community property. The neighborhood transformed overnight without her. People started trimming their hedges without worrying about citations. Kids played in front yards again. Greg organized a volunteer cleanup, and over 30 residents showed up with rakes, gloves, and a portable grill. Someone brought speakers. It felt like a block party disguised as a work day. That weekend, I got a knock at my door from Abel, a retired postal inspector who lived 2 doors down. He held up a thick envelope. "I pulled my own deed and boundary survey," he said. "Turns out she shaved 4 feet off my lot, too." Claimed it was for a community footpath that never got built. He wasn't the only one. Over the next week, 7 other homeowners came forward with similar stories. Their property lines had been moved, some subtly, others by several feet. Most hadn't noticed until they saw what happened with mine. We organized a group filing with the county assessor's office. Each of us brought our original deeds and surveys. The assessor's rep, a sharp-eyed woman named Marla, promised to fast-track the corrections. She'd been tracking Deborah's filings since the investigation began and said they'd never seen a case this wide. She didn't just steal funds, Marla told us. She tried to rewrite the neighborhood literally. During the preliminary hearing, the prosecutor laid out the evidence in a calm, measured voice. Deborah sat at the defense table with her jaw tight, her eyes fixed on the floor. They showed the fake invoices, the shell company bank records, and the altered maps. But the moment that shook the room was the video of her removing my boundary marker. The judge paused the footage halfway through and looked over the rim of his glasses. "You're telling me this was done without consent or notification?" The prosecutor nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor. The defendant trespassed on private property and removed legal survey markers to support a fraudulent claim." The judge leaned back. "Proceed." By the time the hearing was over, the case had been scheduled for trial, but the writing was on the wall. Deborah's attorney requested a plea deal the next morning. She accepted a deal that included restitution, 5 years of probation, and a permanent ban from serving on any homeowners association board in the state. She was also ordered to personally reimburse the HOA for all misappropriated funds. Greg updated the community at the next meeting, held in the newly cleared clubhouse. "We're getting every penny back," he said. "And we're implementing new bylaws. No spending over $500 without a full board vote. Every financial record will be public. And we're forming a resident watchdog committee." Applause erupted, not polite clapping, but real, from the gut cheering. Afterward, I stood with Greg near the refreshment table. "You ever think it'd go this far?" he asked. "I figured she was up to something," I said. "But I didn't know she was trying to rewrite property lines like she was playing Monopoly." He chuckled. "We owe you for kicking this off. You owe me nothing." I just wanted my stakes back. He looked around at the neighbors mingling, laughing, comparing notes about their newly restored yard lines like war veterans swapping stories. "Well," he said, "you got them back, and then some." Later that evening, I walked the perimeter of my yard. The new orange-painted survey stakes were still there, now reinforced with reflective caps. I paused at the far corner and planted a small metal plaque in the soil. Just 3 words etched into brushed steel, line held. Ground 1. It was early spring when the last of the court proceedings wrapped up. The air was crisp, but the neighborhood itself felt looser, lighter, as if some invisible clamp had finally been pried off. With Deborah permanently barred from any HOA involvement, and the fraudulent filings wiped from the county records, people started reclaiming more than just their lawns. They reclaimed trust in each other, and in the idea that standing up to someone entrenched in power could actually work. But one problem remained, a quiet one that hadn't gotten much attention until now. The HOA's original insurance policy, the one Deborah renewed annually, had been modified during her tenure. It included a clause that indemnified board members from personal liability for all administrative and property-related disputes, as long as those actions were conducted in official capacities. It was obscure legalese, but the new treasurer, a retired patent examiner named Carla, flagged it when she was combing through archived documents. "This section right here," Carla said, pointing with a red pen, "it's an indemnity shield. If left uncontested, it means HOA funds could be used to pay her restitution." Greg's jaw tensed. "She's supposed to pay that back out of her own pocket." "Not with the dues she stole from." "Exactly," Carla said. "But if that indemnity clause stands, she could file a claim with the insurance provider and shift the burden back onto us. Within days, Greg called an emergency meeting not just with the HOA board, but with the district attorney's office and the state's Department of Insurance. The clause had been buried in an amended policy Deborah negotiated directly with the provider. No board vote, no record of discussions. The agency rep confirmed the policy had been altered through a single signature override. That kind of change was highly irregular. "This wasn't just a power grab," said Rivas, the financial crimes detective. "She structured a legal fortress around herself in case she ever got caught. That's premeditated." The DA's office agreed. They filed an addendum to the original charges, classifying the insurance manipulation as attempted restitution fraud and insurance deception, a second-degree felony under state law. Deborah was reprocessed, this time under tighter restrictions. Her bond was revoked, and she was remanded to county custody pending a new hearing. At the neighborhood level, Greg called for a full reformation of the HOA charter. It wasn't enough to clean up the mess. They needed safeguards, real ones. "We're not going to pretend like this was an isolated incident," he said during the next board meeting. "If someone wanted to do this again, the old rules would let them." That ends tonight. The new charter included mandatory third-party audits every fiscal year, a public vote on all insurance policy changes, and a clause that required full board signatures for any legal filings involving property lines or easements. More importantly, a community oversight committee made up of 7 rotating residents was established to monitor all board activity. Carla would serve as the first chair. It was during the committee's first walkthrough of old records that they discovered something else: a small plot of land adjacent to the park labeled Provisional Green Zone. It was just under half an acre, wedged between 2 cul-de-sacs, and had been dormant for years, overgrown, unlit, forgotten. "Why's this marked as provisional?" someone asked. Abel, who joined the oversight committee, leaned in. "Because it was supposed to be a community garden. The board approved it 6 years ago, but it never happened." Greg frowned. "Where'd the budget go?" They pulled the ledger from that year and found the line item 23,000 earmarked for soil, fencing, and irrigation. No receipts, no vendor names, no timestamps, just a single handwritten note in the margin, pending vendor confirmation. The funds had vanished. The garden was the final piece in a long chain of thefts. Deborah hadn't just stolen money or manipulated maps, she'd stolen opportunity. The chance for neighbors to build something together, to grow something literal and lasting, so they rebuilt it. That spring, the HOA voted unanimously to convert the provisional zone into a real garden. Raised beds were constructed, irrigation lines laid, and solar-powered lights installed. Kids painted signs for tomato rows and bean trellises. Retirees brought compost and rain barrels. Even the dog walkers stopped to help spread mulch. The day they unveiled it, a brass plaque was set into the garden's stone archway. It read, "In justice we planted. In truth we grew." No one said who wrote it. No one had to. The following week I got a letter in the mail. Not from the HOA or the county, but from the district attorney herself. A formal thank you for my role in initiating what she called one of the most comprehensive neighborhood integrity cases in recent memory. It wasn't a form letter. I could tell by the way she referenced specific details, the survey markers, the footage, the public records I filed. At the bottom, she added a short line in ink. It started with 1 yard. Now it's a community. That letter went into a frame next to the surveyor's certification, both now hanging in my garage. Not because I needed a trophy, but because I wanted to remember what could happen when you refuse to back down. When you refuse to let someone quietly move your lines, literal or otherwise. A month later, Greg stepped down from interim leadership. He didn't want to run permanently. Said he preferred coaching Little League and fixing up his motorcycle. The new board president was elected in a landslide, Carla. She didn't want power either, but she had something better: clarity. The last time I saw Deborah, she was being escorted across the courthouse parking lot in ankle restraints. She didn't look at me, didn't look at anything, really. Her attorney walked stiffly beside her, holding a briefcase and avoiding reporters. She'd accepted a reduced sentence in exchange for full financial restitution, a confession of misconduct, and a lifetime ban from managing any community funds or property organizations. Inside the courtroom, the judge delivered the final ruling. She'd serve 18 months in county detention followed by 3 years of monitored probation. Any violation would trigger felony charges. The restitution amount was locked in $84,000, all to be paid to our HOA's newly restructured account. There would be no insurance payout, and with that, it was over. No one cheered. No one jeered. It wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. That evening, I walked through the garden trail with my son, Grant. His arm was long since healed the cast replaced by calloused palms from building raised beds and hauling compost. He pointed at a row of sunflowers, just starting to reach above the fencing. "They're going to be taller than me soon," I nodded. "That's the goal." As we turned the corner, I caught sight of Abel and Nina setting up a pair of benches under the shade trees. She waved. He gave a quick thumbs up. Across the path, Lewis was stringing lights between 2 poles, prepping for the weekend's potluck. None of it would have existed if we hadn't drawn a line and held it. The garden glowed in the early evening light, every leaf and vine a quiet reminder. The boundaries we protect aren't just about property, they're about principle. And when a community refuses to be divided, no one person, no matter how entitled or manipulative, can redraw the lines to suit themselves. We hadn't just reclaimed yards, we'd reclaimed each other.